The world's 10 weakest military units, the coveted award. Let's go.
You might think that the military is entirely filled with big, strong men and incredible, brave women, but that's not always the case. Some troops around the world aren't half as successful, either because of inside corruption or because they just simply don't have the manpower to fight for their country on a sufficient level. Stay tuned until the end to hear about the country that uses child soldiers to try and protect the land.
Before we get into the meat of this, you put in the comments who you think is the weakest, worst military in the world, from experience or just your 2 cents.
Let's get into the weakest military troops that put their country to shame.
This guy.
Iraq.
Yes.
Iraq used to be the fourth biggest army in the world under Saddam Hussein, but it's now little more than a shadow of its former self. The Iraqi army was given around $26 billion of investments and years of training from American and British forces, but that wasn't enough to keep them up there with even the average armies of the world. One of the biggest problems in the Iraqi army...
Unfortunately, out of 26 billion, probably 25.5 was siphoned off from thieves, right? That's why most of these militaries are terrible. Their training sucks, the people don't care, and culturally, they don't have any patriotism.
Was the huge number of ghost soldiers, those who were receiving pay but weren't showing up to work.
That's what I'm talking about, the ghost soldiers. That means the politicians, 30 family members that are sitting at home watching soccer.
Korea. The North Korean army might not seem like a threat to too many people because it's unlikely we'll ever face their land forces in person. And while we might already consider North Korea to be an embarrassment to the rest of the world, their military is even more of a laughingstock from the outside. Conscription to the army is a compulsory part of life in North Korea, so residents don't have a choice but to sign up. The horrendous conditions that they're put through, ranging from starvation to corruption and abuse, means that the rest of the world looks on sympathetically.
I don't think that makes them the weakest in the world. I'd tell you, in today's high-tech world of military, I suspect they don't have it. I mean, look at them over an image at night. It's barely any lights on. What do you guys think about North Korea?
Eritrea.
What the hell is this?
Eritrea is widely considered to be the worst place in the world to join the army. It's another country to force its inhabitants to sign up, but there's no term of service, making it open-ended. In 2015, the United Nations Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in Eritrea released a 500-page report detailing the systematic, widespread, and gross human rights violations that spurred thousands of people to flee the totalitarian East African country to get out of the army once and for all.
That's pretty prevalent in these type of countries in certain parts of the world where you have totalitarian rule. People don't want to be there. They don't get taken care of even with a modicum of the degree that U.S. troops get.
And what makes matters worse is that the people forced into the army aren't even properly paid. They only receive a tiny amount of pocket money. Nigeria. It was only 2014 when Nigerian army troops launched an unsuccessful attempt to assassinate one of their country's most prominent generals. And although the plot didn't work, it did shine a light on the failings of the military. At the time, the country was struggling with the recent abduction of 200 schoolgirls by the militant group Boko Haram. The attempted assassination was so badly done that the army was forced to deny it had attempted an attack in the first place. The only thing it really achieved was highlighting the low morale and poor capabilities of the 60,000-strong army.
Why do you think Boko Haram can have a somewhat active military, a militia, meanwhile the government can't? Is it about the funding source of Boko Haram? I don't know. You guys tell me what you think as the experts.
Costa Rica. Costa Rica would struggle if anyone wanted to attack it because it barely has an army. In fact, its army is so small that many people don't even think it exists nowadays, and many peace activists have praised the country for its absence of a military, which was formally removed in 1948. But Costa Rica still has official fighters, even if they don't fall under the term of an army. It has 70 soldiers who are trained to intercept narcotics traffickers, rescue hostages, and act as a high-intensity counter-terrorist unit. However, Costa Rica is still focusing training on potential future conflict.
70 soldiers. If that's right, that's not even a military. You might as well round up the police and give them a firearm. You guys ever seen the Costa Rican military? I know that El Salvador has got a pretty strong, or at least pretty obvious military when you go there.
The Philippines. The Philippines was called the 6th worst army in the world back in 2015 thanks to its inability to upgrade their training and equipment. Their problem started when Chinese military forces started moving forward and claiming land belonging to the Philippines. But despite this, Army spokesman Colonel Benjamin Howe said that they were working to become a world-class army by 2028. At the same time, the country is starting to build up its supply of equipment and to modernize existing pieces. That's all well and good, as long as no one decides to attack them in the next decade.
Well, I don't know about the Philippines. I've been around some of those guys, and they look pretty locked on. Now, having the highest tech stuff is tough for a lot of these countries, some of the money. But I can say this, the folks in the Middle East we've been finding did not have the highest tech stuff. So if you make it guerrilla warfare, it changes the dynamics of the war, right?
Tajikistan.
What?
Tajikistan rarely makes international news, and that's partially because it's such a small and unassuming country. However, its borders are with Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, China, and Afghanistan, which is where its problems begin. I
think I've heard of this as a great holiday spot. What do you guys think? Do you think it's a good place to go on a holiday with the family?
A dangerous country itself, but its highly political neighbors means the country has to be constantly on high alert for danger. And it would really be a problem if trouble did decide to come to Tajikistan because the army is incredibly underdeveloped. There are reportedly 16,000 soldiers involved in guarding one of these borders, but their weaponry and military equipment leaves a lot to be desired. Mongolia.
Something like guarding a border, especially in the mountain areas, if it's a pass, I don't know that it matters what kind of equipment you got. I'm sure they've got AK-47s, which would be more than adequate, so let's keep watching.
The Mongolian army used to be far stronger than it is now. At its peak, the empire of the Mongols stretched from Eastern Europe to Eastern Siberia and the Korean Peninsula, and its army was representative of its size. This was back during the 13th century, and unfortunately, the country's military has gone downhill over the years. And its neighbors, Russia and China, keep getting stronger and stronger, which isn't a good sign. Mongolia's army definitely needs to step it up in case a war ever breaks out between those two.
Those countries aren't going to step it up. There's not enough resources. They're either going to pick one side or the other and just be the go-between as everybody goes to fight around them. So that's not going to make any difference.
Saudi Arabia has the opposite problem when it comes to rounding up troops. Its army is actually too big. And while this might never seem like a bad thing, it's caused huge organizational issues, and no one is really sure how to tackle them. Because other than simply kicking people out, how do you reduce the size of an army? The Saudi Arabian army's main goal is to push back Iranian forces, but they're limited by their military, despite the fact that the kingdom is one of the world's largest spenders on defense. As it stands, people are far more scared of the Iranian army than they are of Saudi Arabia's.
Now, a country like Saudi Arabia could easily get private military contractors to be their military, right? They got loads of money, loads of resources, and they've got a good friend in the U.S., so we showed that during Desert Storm.
Central African Republic. What do you do when you need more soldiers, but all of the adults in the country are already fighting or otherwise engaged? Start picking out children to fight instead. And that's exactly why there's so much shame on the Central African Republic's army, because they're using underage fighters to supposedly protect the country.
That's not uncommon in lots of militaries when they're fighting a war. Look at Germany during World War II, you had the Hitler Youth. You fill in the blank on that one. There's several countries that have done that. I'm sure we would as well. But if that's their sole means of recruitment, that could be a problem.
10,000 children were used by armed groups in the conflict in the Central African Republic between 2012 and 2015, and many still remain there now. These children, some of whom are as young as 8 years old, are taught to fight in the military, despite the government's best efforts to stop people under the age of 15 from joining.
Who do you think is the weakest military? Somebody you trained with? Somebody you've seen? Let it rip in the comments. New to the channel? Thanks for stopping by. For my current subscribers, I appreciate you. Thanks for watching.